so bad. Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in on a Saturday at 1 p.m. I know you guys got things to do, but today is our second episode of Boss Moms, and we are here with Angela, who, is the founder of LifeSpark LLC. She is our wellness mom. And so we're just going to spend some time talking about, her background in healthcare generally, and some of what she's been doing with her clients at LifeSpark. Angela, say hi. Tell them what you need them to hear right now, and then we'll just dig in.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are. And Aubrey, thank you for inviting me back. I definitely love our discussions. And with that said, I am the proud owner of LifeSpark LLC. That is LifeSpark without the A. We decided to kind of be a little, interesting. But yes, it's a holistic, women-centered provider care, and anything from holistic perspective, and that is services including hypnosis, spinal flow, wellness counseling, and in that we take care of so many things, including hypnobirthing for our expecting parents. So I'm gonna keep it there, and I thank you for your kind introduction. Let's totally get into it.
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, you really dug in. So now I'm like, wait, you're messing up my flow, Angela. No, but seriously, thank you so much for being here. And what I really want to just kind of dig into is just like your healthcare background. Like, what made you decide that you wanted, a career in healthcare in the first
Yes.
place? Talk a little bit about that journey with us.
Mm. Where do I start? Funny enough, I actually have always had an interest for sciences. And I've always liked the aspect of working to make others feel better in health.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, my journey, though, has been interesting. I actually started out wanting to be a veterinarian from a very young age. I just
Mm-hmm.
loved animals. And then I went into, you know what? I see a lot of healthcare professionals in my family line. Maybe I'll just be a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
And believe it or not, when I went to college, I actually also had a friend who was going for criminal justice. And I was like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
you know what? Yes, let's do it. So I applied to John Jay. And right before we actually started, I was like, you know what? No, I just had this epiphany. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, this is not what I want. So I
Mm-hmm.
went to a community college, and I think that was the highlight for me because as I was doing criminal justice, I think it's the fact that when you want to help people, it's one thing, but it's how you help people. Do you want to help people to speak up? Do you
Mm-hmm.
want to help people to, have justice or have peace?
Mhm,
And my
mhm,
thing was to be well because then they can do whatever else they need to do for themselves. Like I
mhm,
always knew people had that autonomy and being able to do things for themselves. I actually find it disrespectful when some folks try to think for you or think they know better than you.
mhm,
Along that line, I then went into nursing. I applied for Malloy and I told my friend, listen, I'll just be seeing you around, but I'm going to go somewhere else. And there's just always something having, a neat circle of friends in what you're doing, as a
mhm,
support system. But even in stepping away to say, you know what, I'm going to take this path,
mhm,
obviously leading me to where I am today. So I went into nursing school. I started out though as a home attendant
mhm,
because that really got my feet wet. I really get to see, do I like the idea of this? Of course, it sounds nice, but when you get your hands in and you're doing the work, you're turning the folks, you're doing the bedside care, you're helping the nurses, talking to the doctors, getting the lingo. It's mostly inpatient, obviously.
mhm,
And so I really said yes. It just felt so right.
mhm, mhm,
Clearly there's a different texture because when you are a home attendant, because at the point I had gone in to do phlebotomy, doing EKGs, like the whole scope of
Like
being the
all the certifications. It's funny because I know about all these certifications because my
right.
my mom's a nurse too. I have a couple aunts who are nurses too. So like
Mm-hmm.
I totally, I mean, what would have made my mom happy is if my sisters and I all became nurses. So we are all, although she's proud of us,
Right.
we know deep down there's that, like, tinge of disappointment that, we didn't follow in her footsteps. But
Mm,
what I'm hearing is you counted the cost. Like, even after you made that decision,
yes.
you were like, you know what, let me make sure this is actually what I want. And I think that's so important, kind of no matter what field you're going
Mhm.
into, to really think about, like, if you can get some immersion into the field ahead of time to
Yes.
know, like,
Yes.
definitely do it, because then you really know if you just like the idea, like we were saying offline. Do I just like the idea of this
Right.
thing, or have I really, like, sorted out, like, what it
Mm-hmm.
is to really, take on this role, take on this career? No, I think that's so important.
And what it asks of you, because at that
Mhm,
time, mind you, I had to do two jobs. I used to work at White Castle. Nobody probably knows this, but I did work at White Castle in my past
mhm,
life, and that was to pay my way through the nursing assistant job.
mm,
And at the same time, of course, going to college and doing whatever you have to do. But you wouldn't believe it. So by the time graduation occurs and uh, you actually are, but I did mention my mother is actually a home attendant.
mm,
And it just so happens that I remember her telling me, Angela, why aren't you, come and be a nursing assistant? And I was like,
mhm,
really? I don't know. But she was working in the home setting, right?
right,
And I was looking to be inpatient, but I wasn't even thinking about that. I'm like, no, I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm going to have on a suit. Like, I'm going to have on this and that and that. I was like, yeah. But after a while, I was like, you know what? I should actually go that route.
mhm,
And with her planting that seed, I was so more open hearted and minded that I pursued those three certifications
mm,
and I got through to where I needed to. And of course, getting that experience then catapulted me into going into the RN
yeah,
pursuing of that. But
mhm,
it's really one building block at a time, and it's
yeah,
amazing looking back at that experience. And I just wouldn't change a thing.
mhm,
I wouldn't
mhm,
change a thing. And there's so many people who are saying, well, if you want to be an RN, you have to do this first, and you got to do this first, and you got to do this first. And it's like, okay, it's beautiful to have other person's perspective. It's always amazing. However, what you come up with yourself when you know
mhm,
exactly what you want to do and how you want to do it, clearly their opinions
yeah,
help. But I gotta tell you, having that professional exposure was a game changer because you could see the toils of the day. Like you could see them on their feet all day.
mhm, mhm,
I remember at one point as a CNA, I actually had what they call plantar fasciitis, whereby the bottom of your feet gets so sore from being on your feet
mhm,
so long.
mhm,
And that was me actually having more breaks than the nurses. And I was like,
mm,
if I'm getting this and they're the ones on their feet all day, oh my gosh,
yeah.
right?
What is it
Uh,
like? Yeah.
Oof, the kind of mistakes they could make. When you're a
Mhm,
nurse, you're liable for people's lives, and
mhm,
one mistake, that's it. So even having to deal with such failures to the point where it's not going to be a tragic impact on you to like, oh my gosh, what did I do?
mhm,
But I got to see everything, like the
yeah,
ins and outs behind the curtain.
mhm,
Um, and I now I gotta admit, and I realize I'm going a little bit back and forth here. It's don't mind me, but in explaining it, looking back, it's like it was actually all happening for a reason.
mhm,
You know,
mhm,
at that point, I was in Long Beach Hospital. That was in Long Island, way before the
mhm,
shutdown with Hurricane Sandy.
mhm.
And then having finished my nursing school, I was like, oh wow, I just finished my nursing school. The hurricane just shut down the hospital. So yes, of course, I
And
had
that's like
gained.
all your contacts, right? So
Yeah,
it's like you were established in that hospital, and now you finally got your piece of paper.
mhm,
You know, um, now you gotta like go find a different place, like a different, to go start kind of like building your reputation with like
There you
new
go.
people. So like tell us a little bit about that.
Let's see. So I get in, and you know what? I'm saying to myself, I got to keep in touch. And so good for me. They actually had that. We had a knit group. Like we would
Mhm.
meet on like some Fridays, maybe 2 weeks out. I'll say like every other week. And then it went down to like 3 weeks and then once a month because
Mhm.
people have lives to do and we
Mhm.
move on, right? You have those contacts, but they move on. So it's like, okay, now what do I do? And interesting enough, it's actually at that time when I decided I really would like to do patient care, but I see myself more of a leader.
Mhm.
So then I pursued nursing, but being in administration.
Mhm.
How
Mhm.
did that start off? Is I wanted to help those who are helping others. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And so as I left nursing school, I was like, I gotta go back to get my master's, right?
Right.
And that's actually then did community care, which is manage long-term care, helping individuals having services in their home.
Mhm.
And I got into that, and it's like, is they really nursing? And that's something that's interesting. Some folks feel like to be a nurse, you need to do so much hands-on. You got to do this, you got to do that. But as the career is evolving, there is still so much work to be done, even though
Mhm.
you're behind a desk. I personally feel so fulfilled. When you're working with individuals that care for others, they easily, as you can now hear, they get so challenged.
Mhm.
They're growing, they're taking care of
Mhm.
their families, and they're caring for others at the same time. So it's like, who's supporting them?
Right, right.
And it's sort of like you want to charge those who are helping others. And
Mhm.
that's where it led me to say, you know what? I love nursing, but I really love this part of helping others. And so when I got into my role of home care, of course, we all have humble beginnings.
Mhm.
And to this day, I've actually, with the same company for more than 10 years now, believe it or not.
Mm.
And I love it. So, when you're helping these individuals, you really see the change you make in their lives
Mhm.
and the people who work to support them,
Yeah.
because then they get to be their best selves while they do the job they do and their families.
Mhm.
And at the same time, it's like, oh my, this is
Yeah.
really, really amazing.
Mhm.
Seeing the patients in inpatient setting versus outside in their home outpatient setting is like night and day.
Mhm.
And some folks don't realize it, but those very nurses that may be actually coming to see them, they themselves are simply human beings, right?
Mhm.
And so by being a nurse leader, I like to call that, I've been able to actually do even greater impact because they
Mhm.
get to do more. Like it's more of multiplying yourself, so to speak,
Yeah.
and reach more people that way, if
Mhm.
that makes any
Mhm.
sense. Yeah.
No, that makes sense. I mean, it sounds like, ultimately you're doing what you set out to do was to help people. And, what I love is like you talk about the evolution of what that looks like, right? And so in the beginning, it was about kind of on this hands on experience, but
Yes.
now it's, establishing policy, doing
Mhm.
training and development of team members so they can actually show up and feel like their best while
Yes.
while they're doing well for others. No, I think that's
Mhm.
so awesome. And so it sounds like you really love this. So
Yes.
what made you decide, oh, I think I want to go try being an entrepreneur? Like what
Right?
what got you to that step?
Yeah. I've really always known the idea we could do more than one thing. Like, when you're
Hmm.
growing up, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? And it's like, I've always wanted to be a businesswoman. And I think that was really the outfits with the lawyer. Like, I just love
Yeah.
that vibe. They were always just stylish and on. And being an entrepreneur goes into actually my personal experience as a mother.
Hmm.
It opened more doors for me in a sense of, wow, what else is out there for me,
Yeah.
and so I love working with birthing moms, birthing parents, I call them. And it's simply because they are bringing life into this world. And
Mhm.
my personal experience was just so amazing.
Mhm.
And before it was amazing, it wasn't amazing. So
Mm.
I was literally like, the before and after, I was like, oh no, I really want to be a part of that change.
Mm. Do you feel
And
comfortable
so,
telling us a little bit about kind of what happened, without getting into like some of like
yeah,
the
the
finer,
ways.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So my first, so here's my thing. When I was always this little girl, like when I'm gonna have a family, am I gonna ever gonna have family? And sure enough, it happened, right?
Mhm.
I've always wanted to have an experience of a natural birth.
Mhm.
And it just so happened my provider at the time was not encouraging that, in a sense where it's like, it's modern days now. Why do you have to go through that? Just do this,
Mhm.
just do that. And I was like, but this is what I want. And
Right.
I could just never get it. So my first two births, I actually had them in a hospital.
Mhm.
But for each one, I wasn't as comfortable as I would have liked to be. I
Mhm.
remember at one point, it's like you either get the epidural or you get a C-section. But
Yeah.
it was the nature of the delivery. And now I understand, looking back, uh, their decision was right.
Mhm.
I think
Mhm.
it's the delivery and how they were speaking to me and at me, to the point I was like, oh,
Mm.
you know what I mean? Like I was so powerless.
Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, at that time, I was still going through nursing school when I had my two firstborn,
Yeah.
second and first and second, I should say. And so you can imagine all of that, right? That there was
Mhm.
no comprehensive approach of the roles the person makes, the stress and
Yeah.
anxiety of raising a family, and being a student, being a wife, and everything else. So I do see a difference though, from
Mhm.
then till now. So what I'm saying is that being offered a choice,
Yeah.
having a choice made for you before you can even make the choice, is very frustrating.
Mhm.
So of course I ended up having that epidural. I also had some other things done, and I was like, oh, really? It could have been better. So
Mhm.
without dissatisfaction, as I progressed into my life, I decided to have more children, and this time it was on my term.
Yeah.
I really find that it was actually a very humbling experience. In a sense, that's when things got um, a little bit unsafe, to the
Mm.
point where, had I not made that change, I don't believe I would have avoided trauma that was going to happen.
Yeah.
And my little one would have been very severely hurt, because the complications were low birth weight and some other things that were happening. And it's like, okay, I understand the situation. They're doing all this testing, but what exactly can I do as the mother? I actually, at that point in time, decided to even switch my providers. I
Mm.
had my provider for 10, about 9 to 10 years, and I
Mm.
just switched. And that was the best decision I ever did. Mind you, I was then now 6 months pregnant.
Mm.
And I was like, no way, like, this is what I want. And no one's going to take this away from me, but I need to do it right.
Yeah.
Right. So I still need that guidance. And I find that, in having that fulfilled, it was me finding the perfect midwife. Yes, there are such people, guys. And she took me on, but obviously she still wanted me to connect with another, OBGYN,
Yeah.
obstetrician, because safety first. And I said,
Yeah.
yeah, no problem. I just want someone who has a different perspective, right, as well.
Yeah.
I kid you not, when she did my testing, my vitamin D was the crappiest. I
Mm.
mean, like, it's
Mm.
common sense, right? We all live in this world,
Yeah.
we're mostly indoors, but like, why wouldn't they have told me that when they were
Mhm.
doing all this testing, all these sonograms? Well, we're just monitoring the growth, but what are we doing to intervene? And that was
Right.
the thing that wasn't happening. So I, happened to supplement. Clearly, I was under a lot of stress. So my, whole levels of managing my day to day had to be switched. And this person was actually someone I could talk to. She was listening. It wasn't like,
Mhm.
okay, so, as we do this, I'll see you next week.
Yeah.
Right? You don't even
Yeah.
get a chance. Like, someone is talking and they're looking at something else. And this is really maybe a tip for some providers. When you're
Mhm.
talking to your patients, you really should have eye contact and not write something down and then talk to them. Because as you're speaking, whatever you're saying to them, like, you miss the body language, you miss
Yeah.
their facial expressions, you miss so much. And even as I was scared, I'm like, I can't even tell them that I really want to have a home birth. Like, how can I do that? Because all they tell me is like, this is bad, this is bad, this is bad. I'll see you next week. Okay, bye.
Yeah,
And
wow.
with
So
the
like
midwife,
no, so they really, the who you were kind of like working with initially, they
mhm,
it sounds like they didn't even like bother to even give potential solutions
right? And
to
that's the thing. It's like,
some of the
oh,
issues that they raise.
that's it. Oh, you want to
You
make
know,
you want a home birth? No, you can have a home birth. No, you cannot, because you
mm,
have this, that. Okay, I'll see you next week. It's like, but
mm,
and it was that approach of I felt like I was being shut down.
yeah,
Obviously, when you're having someone that you feel is authoritative in whatever field they have, it's like, oh, you know what? Maybe they know best. But
mm-hmm,
deep down, it's like, but this is what I want.
yeah,
So with the midwife, the difference was we sat down, and it wasn't such a big, like, you're sitting over there across the room and the other person is all the way over there because they have this big old desk in front of them. I spoke with her. She listened. She asked questions, but I did
mm-hmm,
most of the talking.
yeah,
And that was the big difference for me because she's like, listen, I know what you are seeking, but this is what needs to happen in order for that to happen.
yeah,
So she got me out of the big picture to the process. Step one, you
mm-hmm,
gotta do this. Step two, you gotta do that. And step three, how does that
mm-hmm,
sound? Right?
yeah,
And I felt like, oh my God, this really does make a big difference. Like, I matter. What I want matters.
mm-hmm,
And that's how we started. I decided to actually add on a nutritionist
mm-hmm,
to my, team, because that's what you definitely want to call
yeah,
it. I had to, manage my diabetes as I was pregnant because
mm-hmm,
I didn't pass the test. And that was actually the pivotal moment, because when I got told that I had failed the test, it kind of came off like, oh, you can't even get this right. You know what I
mm-hmm.
mean? Like, I was so shook. I remember going home and I was just crying.
And was this diabetes that you developed
Gestational, yeah,
while you were pregnant?
right.
Yeah. Mhm.
And it's like, oh, don't worry about it. You get over it, when you have the baby. It's
Mhm.
like, oh, but the
Mhm.
chances now of me even having the birth that I wished for are slimming down.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm like shattered. But with this midwife, it's like, well, we could do this. I saw the nutritionist, and oh my gosh,
So you went
it's
from a one person team,
yeah,
right? To now having three people
that's
that
it.
were having a conversation about you,
Yes,
and including you in the
yeah,
conversation.
yeah,
And to me, like for me, just that alone, like is it's like the amount of like security that you can create for yourself by recognizing your own autonomy even
yes.
in those situations where you think you don't have autonomy,
Hmm.
or you feel like, oh, um this person is smarter than me, because like you're a nurse, right? But like
Yep.
what about people who aren't, nurses, who don't have
Yeah.
a master's degree and in
You
healthcare.
make an interesting point, because even if it's
Yeah.
another provider, I kid you not, when you're in that role, you're not a nurse anymore.
Mhm.
And when you're obviously wearing that gown, you get stripped of all of that, right? I mean, you may have an idea of what's happening, and it's like, oh, you're a nurse,
Mhm.
you're a nurse, and it's like, what? I'm a mother.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you have different approaches to certain things, but and that's another thing too, as person labeled as a minority, as a female, as a black
Mhm.
woman, you name it. It's like you got all these labels. It's like, well, you're
Mhm.
high risk and you're above 35 and you're la, 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 la. And it's like, what?
It's like all the reasons why, almost like all the reasons
Right,
why you shouldn't exist,
right.
even,
Ugh,
but thank God that like you were
yes,
able, and who knows, maybe, I hate to sound cliche, but maybe it was the mother's intuition kicking in and saying, you
yes,
know what? Or maybe it was the woman who had been a nurse for years,
yeah.
and had a healthcare background. Maybe it was the experienced mother who
Hmm.
already had two children.
That's it.
So like guess what? Like I've done this, like,
Yeah.
and I didn't like it the last couple of times.
Hmm.
And so I want to reframe it. And so what
Yes.
I love about what you've shared so far is, that there is autonomy in your process, right? And I think this is something that could be applied beyond motherhood, for
Yeah.
anyone out there who's listening, who's thinking, oh, well, this doesn't really apply to me because I'm not a mom. Well, it does, because it really shows that, like, one, no matter what the situation, like,
Yes.
like, anything that concerns you, you have the authority
Yeah.
to make a
And
decision about you and what you want,
yes.
and you have the ability to
Mm-hmm.
to put your team together. And so she, what I'm hearing is, like, Angela had her own draft day, and she was like, you're fired. She was
That's
like,
it.
you've been my quarterback for 10 years, you old, you tired, you're not doing what you're supposed to do anymore. We're gonna draft some new
That's
people.
it.
And so, like, and I'm gonna, like, try to get real cute here with my football analogy, because I'm really feeling it. So bear with me. And she got herself a new quarterback. She was like, yo, let me get a running back too, and I need a tight end.
Yes.
And she was the coach in the situation,
That's it.
because she told them what play she wanted to make, and then they showed her how the play could go.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important. And it really speaks to this, like, entrepreneur in you as well, right? I mean, you had the wherewithal to kind of see, like, I need a new team. Like, my current team isn't doing what I need it to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's not helping me achieve the goals that I need to achieve. And so I need a team
That's
that's going to
it.
help me achieve the goals, right? And so, like, I mean, who knew motherhood? I mean, I think mothers know, but who knew motherhood was, like, the ultimate
It really is.
entrepreneurial venture?
It really
Okay.
is. I kid you not. I
you know?
remember, I gotta admit though, my mind was stretched.
Mm-hmm.
And my map, I call it a map because that's the best way to describe it. When I took my hypnobirthing class as a
Mm-hmm.
parent, not as an instructor,
Mm-hmm.
I learned so much that was applicable beyond
Yeah.
birth.
Mm-hmm.
And it really made sense why hypnosis works for most
Mm-hmm.
things,
Mm-hmm.
because I discovered I'm the kind of person that, depending on who I'm speaking with, obviously I present differently, like we all do.
Mm-hmm.
But if I wanted something, I the way I was raised is, for example, when someone is speaking, you wait your turn or you put up your hand, whatever the case may be, non-confrontational in a
Yeah.
sense. And
Yeah.
so when you're in a situation where you need to speak up, then you
Mm-hmm.
feel like you're being confrontational, but you're actually not. You're
Mm-hmm.
asserting yourself. So even
Mm-hmm.
in learning, you don't have to be aggressive and enraged to get your point
Mm-hmm.
across, because unfortunately that's how we actually get bad communication skills, because then
Mm-hmm.
things just go crazy. I
Mm-hmm.
learned to be assertive. I learned that if I want something, I need to get it done. Yes, but I
Mm-hmm.
need to have the right people around me, right?
Right.
You can't grow orchids in an attic. The orchids
Mm-hmm.
need the air, the sun, water, you name it, right? So you
Mm-hmm.
have a team being around you is those things. And even as a parent, I feel like my first two children got that mom that was like growing, and then my last two, actually I ended up having two home births, by the way.
Mm.
Okay, at that. And that's when I was like, oh yeah, we got to do this, and we got to share the goodness of what this could be for other moms.
Mm.
And that's when I bloomed into being an entrepreneur. And one of my first entrepreneurs, because I do have a second as a caterer owner. And it's like, wow. But even at that, it's like you write your own story, period.
Mm-hmm.
Others
Yeah.
could have an input, but it's your own, and you could make it any language you want, any font you want, any size you want, color.
Add as much pictures as you want,
That's it.
make it bland, make it jazzy.
That's it.
But ultimately, like, you're the one who gets to live your story. And so, like, as much as, and this is something, like, I find myself bumping heads with my own mom a lot.
Hmm.
Like I feel like this is the thing we have bumped heads about consistently, from our inception, is it's kind of like, because on the one hand, she wants me to be autonomous, she wants me to be independent, except when it comes to her.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and so and so like she's the exception to this rule. Like I can go and like, you know, question and do everything I want, but when it comes to her, like
Yeah.
I need to just take whatever she says and run with it, you know, kind of like my way or the highway kind of situation, right?
Yes.
And so like that, like what you know, what you were saying there about the fact that like yes, people are gonna have their opinions, you know, and I'm not a mom, but I have seen the way people love to give advice
Mm-hmm.
to mothers, which, like, although I'm not a mom, I'm like, how obnoxious! Like that you think like your experience is the standard, and now everybody has to follow it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And you know, and so like you know, when I think about it, I'm like, people are just kind of nuts, right? Because you never know what you're gonna get. Like, you know, I have two sisters.
But in their nutsy, they're being right to them
Yeah,
because what they know
well,
is
that's the
true.
thing. Yeah, well, to me, it's like maybe it worked for you, right?
Yeah.
But like not, you know, and I'm not saying that there aren't standards because there are
Right.
standards. People that
Mm-hmm.
even people who are not moms like me can be like,
Yeah.
oh, like I think the diaper needs to be changed. Like don't get upset and say, oh, don't try to tell me about my children. Like
Right.
understand we probably smelling something. And
Uh,
that's why we're you know, and that's why we're hinting to you because we don't want to do it because we're
that's
not the
right.
parent. You know, but I digress. You know, you guys are used to me and my foolishness on these now anyway. But really what I want to get into is Life Spark. I want you to talk
Yes.
about your, you know, kind of talk about a little bit about your business, you know. I want you to talk about like the hypnotherapy stuff.
Yes. Let's
um
get into
i
it.
I feel like that was the first thing that really, I feel like that was the thing I was like asking you like 35,000 questions about when we first connected. Uh,
Just give me 1 second. I need to move around. I'm
okay,
noticing I'm having a little issue here, but I'm
okay,
here. I'm gonna just turn off my little camera here. 1 second, okay?
okay.
All right.
Guys, we have Angela with Life Spark. If you're into hypnotherapy, we're getting into the hypnotherapy section of today's live. I'm just talking to fill time, you know, but what I really love about what we're learning today from Angela is one, we have to count the cost of any decision that we make, you know, whether it's career, whether it's about, you know, becoming a parent, or really any decision that we make in our lives. Like we have to count the costs. We have to be willing to hear the advice that people are giving to us, but there's no need to try to take all of the advice you get. Frankly, you know, if I get advice from 10 people, I know at least half of it is going to be contradictory, right? And so it's kind of using the wisdom to see, okay, what can work for me, what might not work for me. I think is really important. And I agree with that. It's something I do in my own life. It's how I make decisions. You know, um, I've made some really quick decisions in my life, but part of the reason I was able to kind of make a quick pivot is because I had been thinking about something for a while. And so when the opportunity presented itself, it was one of those things where I decided, okay, I'm just gonna go for it and do the thing. And so, you know, that's an important thing I think to talk about as well, because we end up we end up sorry, I'm just switching her out, but we end up in positions to really kind of make changes in our own lives and changes in the people's lives around us. So I think this is a really important point. Angela's back. I hope that makes sense, guys. That was a commercial break. And so
Yes, let's call it that.
So we're gonna talk about LifeSpark now. So talk about kind of the services you provide generally, and then kind of dig into what you do with your hypnotherapy work, and the hypnobirthing work that you do.
Yes. By the way, so I had to actually switch devices, and starting off by saying this was a good segue, I gotta admit, because with LifeSpark, it's anxiety and stress management. Then with birthing moms, because there's a lot of stress with birthing moms.
Mm-hmm.
So this little episode, I could explain. I had to switch from my computer to my phone. Is being able to stay grounded under situations of stress.
Mm-hmm.
For those of you that don't know, I'm actually out of the country and I am signing in from Jamaica. So not only is the time zone different, but I have to
Basically,
navigate.
I'm gonna cut her off there because she's just trying to brag about how she's in Jamaica right now. I mean, she's there for to comfort family, but she just had to let us know. And like, I don't think it's right that she's doing that. But but continue, Angela.
but but a good example that I take my own medicine. So of course, as I'm switching, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is actually happening. And at the same time, so I'm having positive self talk with myself
Mhm.
as I'm coming
Mhm.
on. And so with hypnosis, this is actually some of the things that I teach my clients. And it's like, you know what? I use it too because it really works.
Mhm.
So with Life Spark, it's hypnosis. With hypnosis, I actually also use neurolinguistic programming, and there is parts therapy, which is
Mhm.
why, depending on who I'm seeing, I'm able to navigate based on the age, a child or an adult, right?
Mhm.
The nature of the situation, and helping them to cope, to have less triggers with,
Mhm.
their stress. um, this day we live in, I mean, everything you hear is about people are everywhere just looking for calmness and sereneness, but not everyone can escape. So, for
Mhm.
example, if you have a toxic job, you need to make a living. You have to support your family. You have to pay a mortgage. Are you going to leave your job and go to a peaceful job with a peaceful manager? Maybe not. But is there something you could do to, either change the situation or make it better? And this is what I show my clients.
Mhm.
And so, with that, it's, stress management. Are they having coping mechanisms that aren't working for them anymore? They could be so
Mhm.
stressed they are vaping, but they don't want to vape anymore, or
Mhm.
they want to stop smoking.
Right.
And then some actually realize these are issues that actually have been with them for the most of their adult life, as much as they can remember. It's not really the job. They're walking around angry all the time. Maybe their marriage is in serious trouble, and it's like
Mhm.
it's not even the job, like it's me. And I think that's the thing, like when they
Yeah.
start taking ownership of what's happening, the real work then gets to start. And after that, it doesn't matter if they're working for a corporation or it's being an entrepreneur or whatever the case may be, they're able to just sort of learn to be fluid and having those
Mhm.
techniques and tips to just get through it, and live their best life at the same time, if that makes sense. Same thing with
Yeah,
birthing.
so talk to me about cuz you kind of like threw out this terminology, but we don't know that lingo, this neurolinguistic programming. Can you talk a little bit about that for the listeners? Like, I know
Yes.
words, so I'm kind of, I figure, like contextually I'm like, "Oh, I know what that is." But like, for those of us out here who don't know what that is,
Hmm.
can you just kind of briefly explain what that means?
Yes,
You know.
absolutely. It's a savvy, cute little term, right? But it all the sense is that when you're speaking to individuals, so I'll give you two scenarios.
Mhm.
As a client, right? If say the tables were switched and I was coming to you and you were the NLP practitioner, you would be able to tell if what I'm really feeling in this example, like if I come to you because I have anger management issues, you could show me that, first of all, is it that I'm angry that something was really done to me or what I assumed was being done to me?
Mhm. Mm.
right? So if I believe people are talking about me, but it's actually not happening, it's because my internal dialogue is like, yes, people don't like me. People think I'm this. I can see how they look at me, and you tell yourself these things, and your mind actually believes them. So
Mm-hmm.
you, as a practitioner, are gonna be able to point out, like, Angela, do you notice when you're talking about these things, you're looking in a certain direction?
Mm-hmm.
That actually means, right? It's things you heard,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because the way, it's so funny, you guys, but the way we're all built as human beings, we have certain components within us that we just share as human beings. Like, for
Mm-hmm.
example, as you all know, when someone is talking and they're looking down, you can pick up certain things. When someone
Can
speaks
you
to you,
though? Can you though?
well, in other words,
And
it's
the
their
only
effect.
reason, yeah,
It's their effect.
the only reason I'm pushing back on that is because
Yeah.
I grew up in the Caribbean,
Yes.
and when a child, for example, or
Mm-hmm.
even somebody who's just junior to the person
Yes.
speaking, looks
Yes.
them in the eye, that's
Yes.
considered disrespectful.
That's
And
right. That's the same
so,
with things.
and so like I remember when I first moved to this country, like I was getting labeled with all kinds of stuff, including autism, because I wouldn't make eye contact.
Right.
Even now as an adult, like I still struggle, like I have to tell myself in my head, like every,
Mm-hmm.
oh, you need to make eye contact now. Okay, look away.
Yes.
You're being too intense.
Yes.
Like there's like a consistent internal dialogue. And so that's why I'm
Right.
kind of pushing back on
Mm-hmm.
that, because, in the same way that people are making, like I might be making an assumption about somebody talking about me,
Yeah. Yep.
um people may be making an assumption about me based
Yes.
on my body language, based on how they're reading my body language.
Mm-hmm.
But when we consider different cultures,
Yes.
that's not always the case. And
That's
so
true.
it sounds like to me, like there's a lot of cultural awareness that needs
Yes.
to go on.
Yes.
Because like in America, if you don't make eye contact, it means you can't be trusted,
That's right. That's right.
or you have some kind of neurodiversity, right?
Right.
And so um right, and
Listen,
so
you make a good point. And I think
yeah.
that is why now more than ever, we do need diversity, even in the
Hmm.
healthcare field.
Yeah.
Um, Me personally, being raised in Africa, I definitely share majority of what Caribbean
Hmm.
parenting actually is, because it's very similar to that. And I have noticed cultural sensitivity matters, because yes, so
Hmm.
if I just have you speaking with me because you're looking down, there could be so many things going on.
Hmm.
So it's really a multi-factor, approach. But out of that, you'll be able to tell me techniques that I could use to
Right.
improve whatever's going on. It could be my self-esteem actually that is
Hmm.
suffering.
Hmm. Hmm.
And masking that with anger, because when we're little kids growing up, there's so many things we have to deal with. Life is hard. And as you get up into adulthood and everything else going on, you tend to feel like nothing is working out for you.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
again, depending on who you speak with, again, with that perspective, it widens your
Yeah.
perception of what
Yeah.
what is possible for you. Like, do you choose to actually take on this identity that, yes, may have been handed down to you, or do you want different?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
see what I'm saying? And that's you as a practitioner. But me as a client, then I'm learning ways to speak up for myself. If maybe I have public speaking issues,
Hmm.
but it could be because I was bullied as a child and I never got
Yeah.
over it. So not only do I need to overcome my bullying, I also need to improve my
Hmm.
skills.
Hmm.
So at that, I'm learning techniques to learn to manage under stress, right? Um, and one of the beautiful tips that I could share with all of you today is, when you're under certain stress, always watch what you're going through in your mind. And
Hmm.
the way to turn that off, because our minds are so amazing, but sometimes they can work against us. The best
Hmm.
thing you could do is have something that right away is instantly going to make you calm. It could be a color. Some
Yeah.
of us
Yeah.
love the color pink. So if your mind is going crazy and you're like, you could think pink, or you could just surround yourself with something pink. It's like the minute you see it, your mind just like switches off. Like,
Hmm.
the is identifying that as calmness, right?
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
And so as your, practitioner, I could also help you to say, actually maybe you're more of a scent person. So maybe you need
Yeah.
scent, right? Not actual visual, or you need to have certain feelings, like tactile persons. Like
Hmm.
when you're surrounded by certain people and they touch you on your shoulder, how do you react? You just, like jump up, or
Yeah, don't
are
do
you
that with
like,
me, guys. You might you might catch an elbow.
right? Like you know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah. No, no.
with
It's
that,
funny
it
because
works.
as you were talking, I was like, oh, which one of these are me? Like, do I
Right.
like, I was like, wait, do I want to smell something? Do I want to hear something? Because, just trying to like learn a little more about myself.
Yes.
And what I will say is when I'm stressed, I need absolute silence. Do not
Mm,
talk to me. Do not try to like just don't try to touch
yeah,
me. Let me just breathe.
that's it.
you know
That's
um
it.
and I think most people though they need to talk it out. They need to.
Yeah.
For me, I'm like I literally am like just get it out of me. Like that's just how I feel. Like that's how I've been
Hmm.
since I was a kid. Like I don't necessarily need to talk it out. um and I
And that's the difference, Aria. And I'm so sorry to cut you off.
Yeah.
Some people want to run away from that. You like
Mhm.
to go in and marinate in it and sort it
Yeah.
out.
Yeah,
Not every people.
because then if I do that, then I can come
Hmm.
to you and talk about it in a
Right.
meaningful way. And I feel like my mom was really good at leaving me alone as a teenager
Mm.
when I would have those moments because I would like, just think moms and teenage daughters, and I already told you like we would always bumping heads because like
Yeah.
she taught me to be autonomous, but she never gave me the rider. She never told me that there was an addendum to the contract. And only that applied to everybody but her. And so like I remember moments where like she would, be mom and like just be nagging me. And I would just like go into myself and be like, okay, she gonna stop talking eventually. And then I'll be able to like think this through. And then when she calms down, I'll talk to her later about this because like she really just saying the most right now, and I need her to know she cannot say those things to me ever again.
Yeah.
But I was that kid. Like I feel like most of the kids I grew up around, they would talk back. They would fight back in the moment. Me, I'm in my mind, I'm like, all right, like I can't reason with this person right now. So
You better
like
not talk back. That's
so
the first thing.
I'm gonna just let her talk. I'm gonna let her rip, and sometimes she would rip for a while, and But again, that's moms.
Yeah.
Like when they get on a track, unless you're able to say, "Oh, here's the thing that you wanted," and diffuse the situation, you might as well just keep quiet and let them get
Isn't
get
that
whatever they
something?
need. Let them get whatever they need to get out. But I think you're
Hmm.
right. It's like, being able to go to a practitioner who can help you figure out what you need most, like what helps you
Hmm.
get back to your best
Yeah.
positioning so
Yeah.
that you can articulate your feelings and have a conversation in a
Yeah.
meaningful way, after a stressful encounter, right? And kind
You
of
know,
like,
yeah, what's amazing is people don't realize when you're going through a situation, the way your body reacts. For
mhm,
example, research does show when you're going through an event, an emotional event, it lasts approximately 90 minutes,
mhm,
right? So
mhm,
if you even figure that out, like if you're like, oh my God, I'm feeling this way, just give it 90 minutes.
mhm,
Let it pass. If you obviously attach a story to that and you keep playing that in your mind,
mhm,
you think it's gonna
mhm,
be 90, it's not gonna be 90 anymore. Not even
mhm.
90 minutes, I wanna say, I think it's 90 seconds. I may have mentioned there. But
I was gonna
what I'm
say,
saying is
I was gonna
it's
say
quick.
90 minutes.
90 minutes is too much. No, 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 no. Second. Yeah. Oh God. But what I'm saying is that when you attach a story then and you tell it to yourself over and over, you will trigger those feelings. So that's
Yeah.
why some people end up in this loop, right? Of
Mhm.
yes, that happened, it passed, but you'll have a story anchored to it. And
Yeah,
one of
you're
the
like
main
still
things
stuck
is
in that moment.
that's the
Yeah.
thing. If you rewrite the story or pick what really the the pearls out of the story is, it's like,
Mm,
I always give this worst example. Yes, you got a you got a speeding ticket. The cop was mean, but what are the positives of that? If
mhm,
you miss that, you're gonna keep replaying, oh, the cop was mean, they stopped me. Oh, you think maybe, it was a racist, and it could have been a racist event, don't get me wrong.
mhm,
But the,
mhm,
the, the, the bright side is they actually maybe saved my life or someone else's life, because yes, I was speeding, right? If
mhm,
that's the situation, because the other situations are there, not to discount anyone's experiences, that indeed they are being targeted. That's a fact.
mhm,
But in such a situation, it's like, oh my gosh, they actually saved my life. I didn't even realize that I was speeding. I could be going through emotional turmoil, that I am so cut off from my surroundings, right? Because I'm just getting to
mhm,
where I need to be in disregard of my safety and others. So
mhm.
that speeding ticket is actually a reality check, like slow down,
Yeah, yeah.
right? So but being able to have that perspective of, oh my gosh, they saved my life, not, oh my god, I got a ticket. La, 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 la.
Mhm,
You then just move on. And now, whenever you're saying not feeling well, just have someone else drive, or just slow down and, take your time, that sort of thing.
mhm.
But it's how you approach it. I'd like to give, if we have enough time, but I think we could. I had a client who was
1 minute.
having fine. I had a client who had fertility treatments, right?
Mhm,
She was always just like cringing.
hmm.
It's painful. Usually she goes by herself or her spouse goes with her, but the total experience, the whole place, like the minute she goes into the clinic, her body just like, oh my God, I gotta get out of
Like
here.
she's freezing up
Yeah.
almost. Yeah.
So, in speaking with her, we discovered, yes, she's under a lot of stress. So, certain conditions make our bodies respond in a way where we literally just like shut down
Mhm,
until we feel safe again. So, do you really think it's slowing down your success? The answer is yes. So, we were able
mm,
to work out something to actually have her a little less stressed. The reality is, she really wanted, obviously, to have a child with, her lovely new husband. And
mhm,
it's like, oh my God, but this clinic. And so, being
mhm,
able to now reframe that, okay, it's a clinic, but hey, maybe if you tell yourself to go into the bank to get some money, like, are you gonna just be excited, like, let's go get some money?
mhm.
I'm going to get my child. I'm not going for treatments. I'm going to get my child. What else?
Yeah.
Let's add this. She actually has some recordings. I always give my clients recordings because I don't like people to just have me all the time. Like, I empower them to then move on. So she had a recording she would listen to, and some other tips. And I think for her, we discovered she was more of a scent person. So
Mm.
we actually use eucalyptus to help her soothe herself
So
and recover. And
a calming scent helped her.
yeah,
Yeah,
and so
yeah.
on the next call, it was like, oh my gosh, this was so much better.
Mhm,
And imagine when you're going to certain appointments, all of a sudden you have a headache, all of a sudden you can't think straight. She hasn't had any of those.
mm,
And so
hmm.
what I'm saying here is that you always know what to do. The professional support is literally to just point out things you may have missed. That's pretty
Mhm.
much it.
Yeah.
And if you get the right person, you are legitimately a good match. Because even when you're working with a hypnotherapist, you must have a good match. We're not all the same, obviously, and it's rightly so. But just because you had a bad experience with one hypnotherapist, it doesn't mean they're all the same way. It's okay to have a second and a third opinion.
Well, it's
And
like any other professional,
exactly,
right? Like
exactly.
there's no, think of, for those of you who date, right? Like you don't always meet your
Yes,
husband when you go on your first date, right?
that's right.
And so it's like you always have to find the right fit, right? And so, what cuz we didn't really spend a lot of time talking about it. I really want to talk about how like what your wellness,
Mm-hmm.
like what
Yes.
is your routine? Like how do you, cuz you know what? A lot of people are really good at giving advice, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
so like we like me, I'm like, all right, Angie, we taking the veil off. Tell us a little bit about how you take control of your day. Like what are some wellness things that you
Yeah.
do to stay grounded as a mom but also as a professional and an
Yes.
entrepreneur?
I always start out with saying, when it's written down or someone else is describing it, it's like, oh my gosh, she's doing all of that.
Mm-hmm.
I kid you not. In my personal life, I use a lot of the advice that I actually learned. I'm learning majority of it is I'm my own guinea pig. Like if I don't have a good experience with something, I'm like, how is the other person gonna, want to
Mm-hmm.
do that?
So
So
like
I
what is
mentioned,
your so like give us like a
yeah,
day. Like what's your day like? Like how like
absolutely.
from like I want to know like from the moment you wake up until like the end of your day, like what
Yes.
is that like?
All right. So, depending on the kind of day I'm having, I'll give you two versions. So, depending on the kind of day I'm having, getting up early in the morning, I meditate.
Mhm.
In other words, before I even leave that bed, I have some mantras that I tell myself depending
Mhm.
on what is going on, depending on obviously how I slept. Sometimes I just take in deep breaths and, of course, do my Kegels at the same time.
Mhm.
Um, but mentally, as all that's going on, I find it sets the tone of the day. So I do have four little ones I mentioned biologically. My husband also has two children. So collectively, we have six children. And that means that as the day progresses, with work, I do, for my 9 to 5, I work from home. And so I do have some little ones around, but I have a secure space for my work. And that's the one thing is boundaries have been put in place and communicated, right? So
Mhm.
that helps me to maintain those lines where, this is work, this is family, and having a specific space because once I'm in this space, that's that. If I'm out of that
Mhm.
space, then we could do other things, right? Talk about this and that. And
Mhm.
so, it's like as the day goes on, of course, things happen where you have to de escalate situations because when you're working as a people leader, you're working with other people and their conflicts,
Mhm.
patients being dissatisfied, things are not working out. And it's like, well, you fix it. And it's like,
Mhm.
what?
Mhm.
So when those calls come in, it's de-escalations and figuring out what's what, policy making, some meetings, and so on and so forth. By the time it's 5 o'clock, you don't even know how we got to 5 o'clock, but at that is planned
Mhm.
breaks, as in literally at 1 o'clock, I'm getting up off this desk and I'm walking away. I'm not eating at my desk. All
Mhm.
right. Because I need to have this space for me. So I make sure to have time for me. And when I take those breaks, I take them seriously.
Mhm.
When there's craziness happening and we all have those days, I take even more breaks
Mhm.
because I need more time to refresh and reground. Um, and it could just mean taking fresh air, nothing crazy,
Yeah.
or a beverage, hydrating as I go. I always stick to basics. I always
Mhm.
have mason jar of some water. I do like room temperature. I don't do ice very well. If you get to know me, I always like either tea or something room temperature. And so as I go through the day, I'm like, okay, I've had my 2 liters. Like that's how
Mhm.
literally I do it. And if I do not drink enough for the day, I know it was a really stressful day. That's how I anchor it for
Mhm.
myself.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that's the kind of day where
How
it's
do
like
you
so much
wind down?
happen.
How do you wind down your day?
Right. Winding down is closing that door first thing. It's you can't believe it. Like the sound of the knob going in, like that's it for me. Like we're all done. Computer's off, phone is off. If you email me again, you're getting me tomorrow morning.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that's it. And I tell everybody, you need anything, I'm logging off. So there are instances where, oh, but someone's gonna need you, you're not there. When we work from home, it's so hard to have that boundary of,
Mhm.
but they can reach you anyway. It's just an email, just answer it. It's 1 o'clock in the morning, just answer it. No, I'm off, honey. So when I go back to the other space, which is in the other side of the house, I actually love to do walking, depending on the type of day we're having, walks outside, or just work out with my little ones. I have a 2-year-old who I
Mhm.
swear, I don't know what it is, but whatever I do, she's copying me. She's right there with me. So we could put on a little YouTube video. She's stretching with me, you name it. Now, I do
Mm.
want to mention I have a very supportive husband. So with all of that, we've already arranged dinner conversations. So if I'm doing whatever I'm doing now, he has already been able to sort out dinner.
Mhm.
So that means, if that's the case, or we decided, you know what, we're going to eat out today, then we're all getting ready to go out to eat. But it's planning the days, and sometimes it's done ahead of time. We
Mhm.
actually use a planner where we can say, okay, on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, this is it, blah, 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 blah. It helps a lot
Yeah.
because, as what would you call it, blending family, there's so many things to consider. Homework needs to be done, there's that part of it too. And the one thing personally that I am still under construction or progressively working on is my bedtime routine. I kid you not, because we always have someone that just wants to go a little over, but mommy, but mommy, but mommy. It's like, nope, nope, nope. And just resetting. I always also like to prepare for the next day as much as I can, but not to the point where I have so much control. I've learned to plan but then let things flow,
Mhm.
and that way I don't get stuck on so much of what I could have done better, or I missed this meeting, or I didn't do that, or I didn't do this, I didn't check that email. No, it's like, I'll get to it. My
Mhm.
mind may go crazy, and it does. Then I talk myself out of it. It's like, your feet are in this room, so all your thoughts should be in this room. And that's how I actually bring it back. Like,
Mm.
oh my god, that my mind is like that meeting, oh, that client. It's like, no, your feet are in the living room with your family, so think about your family. And I actually recenter myself that way.
Mm.
And I think that is definitely something that I'm sure we could all share.
No, I
You know?
think that's so important.
Yeah.
And that's why I wanted you to share it, because of all the things that you were doing. I think a lot of times the assumption is if somebody is getting a lot done, that they're
Right.
not taking care of themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's not always the case. I mean, I know when I was working in Big Law, um, I I went in knowing that it was going to be a space where I had to work a lot of hours. Like, I really didn't have a lot of control over that.
Mm-hmm.
Because although I had, when I started in Big Law, I had like almost, I think, like 17 years work experience under my belt, had been managing people, at that point. Yeah, that's right. I was like 34 when I started. And so 17 years, and like I got my first management job when I was 18. And so so I had been managing others for 17 years of my life, and then I took a career where I had to start from scratch because that's just how it works. And now I was entry level again. I no longer had complete control over my time, but like in
Mm.
the end, we always have control over our time,
Yes.
even if a job makes you think that you don't. You
Yep.
always have control over your time. Um,
Always. Always.
and so like personally, I get irritated with people when they say, "Oh, I had no control." No, you always have
Yep.
control. It's
And
whether
a
or not,
choice.
yeah,
And a choice.
and a choice in how you're gonna assert that control. And so like I went into it saying, you know what, I'm gonna work really hard. And I'm different. Like, I don't have children. I don't have a husband. And then I started my career in the middle of a pandemic. It was perfect
Mm.
because I was just home. All I had to do was work. And so I remember like literally telling myself, okay, you're going to work 12 to 15 hours a day, and you're just going to like max out at this job. And so, like,
Yeah.
basically for the entirety of my being at home, I was working 12 to 15 hours a day when it was
Mm.
really busy. But then there were like those, like, a couple of weeks in between a deal where like we had nothing to do. And so like during that time, I would refresh and rejuvenate, and not like try to stress myself too much,
Right.
because I knew once the new deal picked up, or
That's it.
that was it. Like, I was gonna have to get back in, and so like for me, like
And
I counted the costs going in,
yeah.
and and even though I was working 12 to 15 hours a day, it was almost never in a straight line. Like, I
Right.
I had scheduled breaks. I had bought a Peloton before the
Mm-hmm.
pandemic. So like I was working
It was
out.
all
I,
aligned.
I was doing my yoga. I was trying to go vegan during that time. We found out that we I was doing the most, so like I was meal prepping, super healthy. I lost like 60 pounds. It was like ridiculous. And looking back at that time, like I remember like those were just decisions that I made, like
Yeah.
where it was like, I'm gonna wake up and I'm gonna pray. When I'm stressed, I'm gonna pray. Like that was my thing. Like you
Mm-hmm.
stress, you pray. You stress, you work out. If
That's
working
it.
out doesn't help you, pray. And
Find
like
something.
right, and so like for me, and then sometimes it would just be like, bro, like you need to eat, or bro, like
Yeah.
you need to take a nap,
Yeah. You absolutely
um
do. And sometimes that's not
yeah,
enough. That's not enough
you
because
know
for me, I know there are instances where so much happens with the regular work and of course the entrepreneurship, because when you're dealing with other folks, you got to take care of yourself too, obviously,
mhm,
and you're a
mhm,
person. I actually do use acupuncture as
mhm,
my main go-to personally, and of course hypnosis as well.
mhm,
But acupuncture for me works very well. Like I
mhm,
find mental clarity is one thing, but when your body just feels so good and like yummy and you're just like
mhm.
comfortable, um that's it, and
Yeah.
if I know there's a lot of things got happening, I will actually even have like weekly sessions to amp up for that buffer, like I
And
know I'm gonna be
that
good.
was something I did, like, during the pandemic, even though you couldn't go to, a massage therapist, you couldn't go
Mm-hmm.
to PT, like, I had a private massage therapist, and, like, I saw her on a weekly basis, I had, like, my PT person that did my PT because I had been hit by a car, and so, like,
Mm.
and really what I'm trying to kind of like drive home here is like wellness is a choice.
Yes.
At the end of the day, like if you're not well, it's because you're not choosing wellness, and that's not an indictment, it's just a reframe of
Mm-hmm.
well-being, because a lot of times like we want some outside source to create well-being for us, but at the end of the day, like each person, like except for a child, right, but like if the parent isn't being
Yes.
intentional about their own well-being and their own wellness, then
Mm-hmm.
like if I'm not being intentional about my own well-being, then if I'm a mom, then I'm not being intentional about my child's well-being, cuz like I'm not even like if I'm not planning for myself, like am I planning in such a way that I'm factoring in like is my child well, right? And so like these are some of the things,
And that's true because each choice we make has a ripple effect for
mhm,
those especially close to us. So as a birthing parent, how you birth your child mostly is really how you live your life. So even at that, if you're living your life in a way, it impacts your family immediate and your workers, your co-workers, if that's the case. And it's really a reflection of you, so to speak.
mhm.
That's it.
And so, thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. Thank you, Angela, for, interrupting your time in Jamaica to be here with us today, and really just like share, you know, how we can make better decisions, share about like your own experiences and how you decided to to assert your autonomy, to assert control and choice. um I don't know what you guys' favorite stories were, but mine was definitely where she was like, I'm firing you, quarterback, and I'm hiring these three people. To me, it's like it just really shows like a testament of like sometimes what we need to do to achieve the goals that we have, right? And so thank you everyone for tuning in. We're going to give you back your Saturday. Be well, and please reach out to Angela, follow her on LinkedIn, ask her questions, bombard her DMs. Because I'm
Yes.
gonna because I'm gonna ask her if you guys did that. All right.